Second half of August 1941. In the week when World War II enters into its third year, two questions are answered. One, if you're a Soviet citizen and follow de facto dictator of the USSR Joseph Stalin's order to defend your country, will that spare you from his paranoid wrath? Two, if the Nazis see that killing innocent people is emotionally impossible, even for many of the murderers, will that slow down the killing? The answer to both questions is no. This is War Against Humanity, a sub-series of World War II in real time. I'm Spartacus Olsson. In the first half of August, we saw how the men of the SS Cavalry Brigade under command of Hermann Fegelein killed thousands of Jews in the Pripet Marshes, including the cities of Tomsk and Pinsk, and how the Einsatzgruppen continue to butcher any Jew they can get their hands on, assisted by parts of the local population in Belarus and Ukraine. But the Jews are not the only ethnicity that will face prosecution now on the front lines in the USSR. As you may have seen in our weekly episodes and on our Instagram day-by-day feed, the USSR police forces of the NKVD blow up a dam on the Dnieper in an effort to hinder the German advance, but also killing tens of thousands of their own citizens. But now in late August, the Soviet also turns to ethnic cleansing. In July, we saw how tens of thousands of Volga Germans, Soviet citizens of German ethnicity that make up the majority of the Volga German Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic bordering Kazakhstan and Russia, joined the fight against the Nazi German Reich as volunteer militia and members of the Red Army. They are the descendants of German-speaking immigrants who settled the region at the end of the 18th century on invitation of the Empress of Russia, Catherine the Great, herself of German ethnicity. Despite their support for the war against Germany, Stalin and his cohorts have now grown suspicious that the Volga Germans will be a liability as the Wehrmacht continues to advance. On August 12th, the Central Committee of the Soviet Union issues a resolution calling for the expulsion of the German citizenry of the Volga German ASSR and all Germans in the Stalingrad Oblast and the Saratov Oblast, as well as any smaller groups of ethnic Germans residing outside of these regions. On August 17th, Lavrenti Beria, deputy chairman of the Council of People's Commissars and head of the NKVD, sends out the order on measures for conducting the operation of resettling the Germans from the Volga German Republic, Saratov and Stalingrad Oblasts. He assigns the deputy head of the NKVD, Ivan Serov, to command 1,550 NKVD agents, 3,250 regular police, assisted by 12,150 soldiers of the Red Army to carry out the transfer. Ethnic Germans are now banned from serving in the Soviet armed forces, and every single family, according to the Soviet records, that is close to 1 million people, will be sent to Siberia and Kazakhstan to serve in forced labor camps. The ethnic cleansing operations are supposed to begin on September 3rd, and on August 28th, the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR approves and publishes the upcoming measures. The Nazi political police are also busying themselves with ethnic cleansing. As we have seen in the first weeks of August, this is clearly going to be extermination of Europe's Jews. On August 21st, Joseph Goebbels notes in his diary that Hitler has now approved the eastward deportation of all German Jews following a victory against the Soviet Union. To facilitate this, the Jews must be easily identified, and while wearing a white and blue Star of David has been obligatory for all Jews in Poland since 1939, the yellow star will now become ubiquitous across Europe, and Goebbels writes, "The Jewish sign has to be a big yellow Star of David with the word Jew written diagonally over it. When this sign is worn by all the Jews, we can quickly expel them from the centers of our cities." The order to implement this is signed by SS Obergruppenführer Reinhard Heydrich, the head of the security police and the security service, at the end of the month and goes into effect on September 1st. It will soon become obligatory in all of occupied Western Europe, but already now the Nazis and their collaborators are starting to round up Jews for deportation. Like in Paris, where already back in May, 3,700 Jewish refugees from Czechoslovakia, Poland, Germany, and Austria were interned in camps outside of the city. Now, between August 20th and 23rd, French police and German occupation authorities start a new round of arrests, detaining 4,000 Parisian Jews, now also of French ethnicity. They interned them at the newly erected concentration camp outside of the city at Drancy. In difference to the first operation, the German and French security forces now meet resistance. When Germany invaded the USSR on June 22nd, Stalin lifted the ban on French communist groups affiliated with the Soviets to resist the German occupation. Young communist activists now start to openly defy the occupier and their French collaborators. They spread leaflets and organize marches through the city wearing red, white, and blue. The Nazis immediately issue a ban on any such activity, but the protests continues. On the 13th of August, it is made illegal for French Jews to possess a radio set. On the same day, close to 100 protesters march down the Boulevard Saint-Denis, brazenly displaying the tricolor. French police and German troops descend on the manifestation and disperse the crowd by shooting at them randomly. 6 young communists are arrested. On August 18th, 2 of them, selected by the Nazis to be the ringleaders of the protest, appear in court to face charges of resisting the German occupation. They are Smulz Titi Tieselmann and Henri Gauthier, both 17 years old. Eyewitnesses at the trial report that the teenagers appear to have been badly beaten, and a short process finds them guilty, condemning them to death. They are executed the next day. 2 days later, a young communist militant named Pierre Georges, also known as Fabien, shoots a German officer in the back at the Barbès-Rochechouart metro station, fatally wounding him. On the 22nd, in a direct response to the assassination, Otto von Stülpnagel, military commander in occupied France, issues the following order. Starting August 23rd, any current and future French detained by the German authorities or their affiliates, regardless of reason for the arrest, shall be considered hostages. In case of another act, a number of them, corresponding to the gravity of the act, will be shot. It is not an empty threat, as we will see. In Germany proper, on the other hand, the Nazi authorities make an appearance of responding with moderation to public outrage. As you might have seen in previous months, the T4 program has been killing tens of thousands of children and adults with disabilities and mental illness inside the Reich and in Poland. By now, the program has cost around 80,000 lives, but has until now been a secret from the public. However, within the Catholic clergy, it is known, since they run several psychiatric care institutions and have in some cases been complicit in the program. But on August 3rd, the Bishop of Münster, Clemens August Graf von Galen, publicly condemns the T4 program in a sermon, and there's outrage among sections of the German population. On the 24th, the German Führer Adolf Hitler orders the cancellation of the Aktion T4 program. But this is a lie. The killing of psychiatric patients will continue until the end of the war under a new name, the 14F13 program. The execution of victims will decrease. Instead, they will deliberately mistreat the patients, often denying them food and simply letting them starve to death. In any case, since 1939, Nazi doctors within the T4 program have been experimenting, searching for more efficient ways to kill their patients. They quickly abort their tests with injections of morphine and scopolamine, as the limited supply of morphine Germany has needs to be at the front. After concluding that shooting is both inefficient and messy, they start experimenting with gas chambers. First at the Brandenburg an der Havel State Welfare Institute, where they are looking for a quiet way of killing large numbers of patients at once. The room is disguised as a shower, and the gas they use is odorless but lethal carbon monoxide. The witness reports vary. Some say that the victims simply fall asleep. Some say that they die only after suffering shortness of breath, cramps, and seizures. Whichever the case, it takes time, several minutes, which is a problem, especially when the victims are fully conscious and cogent, which almost all of them are. They soon discover that something is wrong and desperately try to escape the hermetically sealed chamber. At the end of August, Hauptsturmführer Karl Fritsch carries out an experiment with another gas in the basement of Block 11 at the concentration camp Auschwitz. It is the equally odorless gas hydrogen cyanide, the active component of the pesticide Zyklon B. The first victims are a dozen Soviet POWs. The experiment is successful in as much as it kills the victims quickly. If they get a lethal dose immediately, that is. But Fritsch is using cells as gas chambers that are not hermetically sealed, and many of the victims only get the lethal dose slowly, leaving them gasping for breath and cramping as they die slowly. When his boss, Camp Commander Rudolf Höss, returns from a trip to Berlin a few days later, Fritsch reports on his success, and they schedule a new, bigger test for early September. But further east, the German forces are carrying out something even more sinister than tests. There, the SS Cavalry Brigade and the Einsatzgruppen continue their mass murder of Jews, but also other ethnicities like Poles and Belarusians fall victim to the Nazi juggernaut. Paradoxically, with the aid of other selections of the local population. Now, the Einsatzgruppen are SS death squads specifically designed as task forces to kill the non-military enemies of the National Socialists. They fall under the direct command of Reinhard Heydrich and go wherever Berlin orders them to go. However, operationally, they are units that are not made up by regular SS men. Mostly, they rely on a crew of volunteer militia, Waffen-SS, and Wehrmacht personnel. In August 1941, they have 12 battalions of the Appel, Order Police, at their disposal. They were intended to be spread out over the occupied territories, but as the Germans conquered less territory than anticipated, they are now operating in higher concentrations. East of the Molotov-Ribbentrop line, there are now 20,000 available troops to commit mass murder under the flag of the Einsatzgruppe. As per Himmler's orders, they are also already widely recruiting Lithuanians, Latvians, and Estonians, Ukrainians, and Belarusians. The SS Cavalry Brigade, however, is not under the control of Heydrich's Einsatzgruppe. This was originally a Waffen-SS security force without much of an ideological purpose, but Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler is now increasingly using the Waffen-SS to pacify occupied territories. At first, his orders are about crushing resistance, but gradually they switch to outright orders to kill Jews. In difference to the Einsatzgruppen, the Waffen-SS lower commanders hold more autonomy and see themselves in competition for glory and precision. Many of them, like Florian Geyer, who we saw in the last episode, try to outdo their colleagues in murderousness, and as Timothy Snyder puts it, they understood that to kill Jews was to fulfill Himmler's desires. Even the decoders at Bletchley Park came to the conclusion that the HSSPF officials, and I quote, stand somewhat in competition with each other as to their scores. Scores that are intercepted by the same said decoders. Despite this organizational patchwork, together they make up a well-oiled killing machine. Historian Henning Pieper describes it like this. Different units pursued different routes. Security divisions of the Wehrmacht were allocated specific areas. Police battalions searched and pacified villages and towns along the major thoroughfares. Subunits of Einsatzgruppe B committed massacres in larger towns. The SS Cavalry Brigade combed rural as well as built-up areas, and all of these formations cooperated in huge massacres. Snyder adds that the Wehrmacht and SS work together like two peas in a pod, with the former registering how many Jews are present in every newly occupied town. The SS, police, and Wehrmacht then debated how many Jews are needed for forced labor and how many can be killed. The Einsatzgruppen then murder the required amount, or the Wehrmacht locks them up in a ghetto until the order police can do the killing later. The efficiency shows in the operational reports for August. Einsatzgruppe B raids the Minsk ghetto, claiming the lives of 5,000 Jews interned there between August 14th and September 1st. In the areas around Antopol and Berezha Kartushka, 1,170 Jews are reported to be killed in the final week of August under command of the SS and police leader of Russian Centrum, Erich von den Bach-Selewski. Einsatzkommando 12 of EGD under command of SS Obersturmbannführer Gustav Adolf Noske kills several hundred women and children as they are driving a convoy of 11,000 people over the Dniester Bridge into Romanian-occupied territory. And there are many more similar reports, but the largest massacre of the month unfolds in Kamianets-Podilskyi in southwestern Ukraine, when SS Obergruppenführer and commander of the SS and police forces of Russland Süd, Friedrich Jekyll, and the Opo Battalion 320 murder 23,600 Jews in less than 4 days from the 26th to the 29th. For the month of August, not including the tens of thousands who the Wehrmacht, auxiliary forces, and civilian collaborators murder, the combined SS and police alone report that they have murdered 44,125 people, mostly Jews. But as impossible as it is to empathize with the perpetrators, these are not robots doing the killing. Henning Pieper writes how the increasing massacres in August show the commanders in the field that the task of killing masses of other people can quickly lead to mental distress. The victims beg for their lives, try to run away, unarmed women, pregnant women, children, and infants. They are then shot by the hundreds from a distance of 5 to 6 meters, either with a carbine or with a machine gun. Aiming for the necks of their victims, blood flows and remnants of the brains splatter. Some don't die immediately and lay screaming in terror and pain as they land in the mass graves. The troops are given pervitin, methamphetamine, to take them through the killing days, and in the evenings copious rations of alcohol to drown their nightmares. Burnout and disobedience are commonplace, and already now suicide rates amongst the troops are increasing. The concern expressed for the men doing the killing stands in horrifying contrast to the lack of empathy with the victims. In steel-hearted determination, the Nazi leadership presses on. They are driven by an utter conviction that this must be done, and refusing to do so is a sign of pathetic weakness. This is how Himmler will express it on October 4th, 1943, when addressing the SS men in a speech. Most of you must know what it means to see 100 corpses lie side by side, or 500 or 1,000. To have stuck this out, accepting cases of human weakness, to have kept our integrity, that is what has made us hard. And it is indeed hardness and pragmatic disregard of all humanity, what can only be described as complete lack of integrity, that is the daily reality in much of the world at the end of August 1941. Stalin continues to persecute sections of his own people, now the Volga Germans. In France and many other places, resistance is growing, as are the brutal countermeasures by the Nazis. While the Nazi methods face backlashes in Germany when publicized, Heinrich is already making preparations to deport all the Jews of Europe eastward, where Himmler is driving the murder rate of the Jews harder and harder. The murderers themselves are already starting to buckle under the task, while their colleagues in Germany and Auschwitz are looking for more efficient ways to kill, to liquidate the most innocent fellow human beings, even killing babies by shooting them point blank. It's so inhuman that not even the most brutal hatred will let the most seasoned killers do it without at least some mental backlash. If only that backlash would make the Nazis slow down. Instead, they simply look for a more efficient, more systematic, less direct way to massacre, to turn a loud orgy of massive bloodbaths into a gargantuan, hissing industry of suffocation. It is to remember these events, to make sure that we know that it can be done by any of us, that we try to cover history in a nonpartisan, factual way, without simple solutions or ideological bias. It is because we need to remember that this can happen again. It has happened again. So support that effort by joining us at the Time Ghost Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. Never forget.